So I'm pleased to say that one of our very special gorillas is with us today. He has a moniker. He may actually tell us the origins of the moniker, but his name is actually Paul Howarth. But I very rarely hear him referred to as that. He's just known as Grubby. Welcome, Grubby.
Thanks, Messrs. Delight to be here, and just for good order, and now that I know this is going to be seen as well as heard, I have changed my name on the screen. There it is.
Oh, brilliant. Interestingly, the screen names don't seem to come up on the recordings. There you go.
Oh, well, that was 3 minutes. That was 3 seconds of my time wasted.
So, Paul, we're just giving people, the patrons, a chance to get to know their gorillas a bit better. So what I'd invite you to do is cast your mind back to those days of youth and splendor, to when you first became engaged with sport and cricket in particular, and what was going on for you then?
Well, I grew up in Devon, South Devon, a little market town called Newton Abbot, as some people will know. I went to a Catholic primary school. We're not Catholics, but in those days you could get into a Catholic primary school without being on first name terms with the Pope. And so that's where I went. Many happy memories of running wild in playgrounds and fields and village greens and that sort of thing. And always loved the outdoor life. Like many kids did back in the 70s, you just spent your whole time out on bikes, playing with bats and balls, chasing each other around, and very quickly developed a love of sport. So early memories, my football team, Ipswich Town, won the FA Cup in 1978. It was just before my 6th birthday. I'd actually been at a mate's 6th birthday party. And unfortunately, I was just that wee bit too young to appreciate the full significance of what had happened. So I'd been at a mate's party. The old man had been on the sofa at home, consuming vast quantities of special brew and a good couple of cartons of Benson and Hedges. And when I got home and we'd secured this glorious 1-0 victory against Arsenal, should have been about 5, by the way. We murdered them 1-0. He turned to me and said, "Isn't it exciting?" And I said, "Why? Might they send us the cup?" That was a sort of early sporting memory. And I suppose if we cut forward a couple of years to 1981, a very famous year in cricket history, of course. And by then I'd become interested in cricket. It might have even been that summer. And I've spoken about this on a different podcast we did a year or two ago. I used to play with some bigger boys from the neighborhood on a green that I can only describe as incredibly sloping. I'm talking about a sort of 30-degree angle from top to bottom. So you'd bat at the kind of the bottom end, and you'd be, if you're hitting straight, you'd be in the V, you'd be hitting well uphill. So I was fielding at mid-on, and I was 8 years old, and one of these bigger kids, probably, as much as 12, was batting, and he clubbed it high over my head. And I turned. My old man had just come to pick me up from the green as well to get me from a tee, and went over my head. I followed it as it arced over me, ran backwards, dived full length, and pouched the catch one-handed in my left hand. Oh. And all these bigger kids were like, "Oh my God, what have we just seen?" And the old man saw it as well. And so from that moment, a combination of realizing what a terrific game cricket was, and the kind of the ill-gotten gains of personal glory, which still attracts me like a magpie to this day, really sort of had me hooked. And it was that so I'd have been 8, I'd have been 9 later that summer, probably, and it was that very summer when Ian Botham's heroics happened. And again, I remember lots of these memories involve my old man, because he's a big sports fan as well. He got home from work. I think I remember watching start of Botham's innings at Headingley that ended up being the 149, and then going out to play, because that's what he did. That's more important. And by the time the old man got home, and I said, I heard he had the radio on in the cricket, and I said to him, "Oh, what's happening in the cricket?" He said, "Oh, Botham's still batting." This is, hour and a half later or something. And as an 9-year-old, I just went, "Bloody hell," like that. Like Ron Weasley, bloody, when he's really young, bloody hell, like that, which of course you're not supposed to say. But the old man let me get away with it because it was such an incredible feat. So that summer, and I remember watching certainly the highlights of those games. I was allowed to stay up late, particularly at the weekends, the 149, and then the even better innings, the 118 at Old Trafford, which many people regard as technically his best innings. And whether he was smashing the Australian bowlers through the covers in what seemed like a lost cause at Headingley. I do remember some lovely commentary from Richie Benno saying, "And you can't bowl wide to both them," and he was getting quite angry about this, dear old Richie, because they were dropping it short time and again and wide. Or whether he was hooking Dennis Lilly off his eyebrows. And I know Dennis wasn't quite as quick then as he had been previously earlier in his career, but it was utterly thrilling. And the fact of that 81 victory at Headingley in particular, which we didn't really see the like again until, well, we've seen some cracking games over the years, but there's sort of few and far between when there's that much of a turnaround. One thinks of in India at home to Australia in 2001. Sorry, it's always Australia who seem to be the victims here. It's not doing that on purpose. Or whether it was back at Headingley in 2019 and Ben Stokes. But
I think Australia have had their revenge sufficiently.
Yeah, just a little bit. So yeah, that 81, that storied and famous 81 summer was certainly something that kind of cemented my love of the game, and I've been hooked, it's fair to say, ever since, and used to enjoy the BBC coverage. You didn't go to too many live games back then. I do remember going to Somerset, which of course was the adjacent county to Devon, and therefore by proxy was my kind of first class county. And it was a scorching hot day. And I remember having a chat with the Glamorgan, we played Glamorgan, with the Glamorgan bowler, Greg Thomas, who played a couple of times for England as well, actually. And his first name wasn't actually Greg, it was John, which explains why he used Greg. He was on the boundary, he'd been bowling, and we were going, all right, how's it going? And he said, yeah, hot enough for you, is it? And I have this vivid memory of having this conversation on the boundary. Now, I'm not sure whether this was the game where the supposed interaction between Greg Thomas and Viv Richards happened, where Thomas beat Richards a couple of times, beat the bat a couple of times and said, it's red, it's round. Yeah, and that's the description. And then the next ball, sure enough, he hooks him for 6 and says, you know what it looks like, now go and fetch it. I don't know if it was there. I like to think that it was.
I hadn't even heard that, but that's a wonderful story.
So yeah, and then I started playing a bit, not just on the village green. My mum and dad took me to there was a sports club in Newton Abbot. We lived in a village outside called Highweek. So about a mile or two away would be Newton Abbot, the throbbing hub that was Newton Abbot. Market day on Wednesday, half day closing.
I've actually been stuck in the traffic in Newton Abbot on market day.
Oh, it's a shocker for traffic. It's a shocker for traffic, Newton, and it's not any better these days either. They keep changing the one-way system, but whichever way round they put it, it's a shocker. But no, I used to go various stages of my childhood to this sports club which housed a squash and tennis club, but also was home to Newton Spurs Football Club, and was also home to, I don't even know what the team was called, but it was Newton Abbot Cricket Club of some description, and I think it was only juniors at that point. And so I started going there, and it's fair to say it was quite it was sort of lads and dads. It was quite a rudimentary setup, not particularly professional. There was this one big fellow who used to shout things like "half hours batting left," and that was your signal for that was how long was left. And sure enough, a couple of games were arranged between our team and what turned out to be, frankly, some much better teams. And we played against a team from Teignmouth, which you may know because I know you know South Devon a little bit, Messrs, on the coast. And we played Teignmouth, and this lad called Spencer was bowling for them really quickly. And I had my Duncan Fernley bat, which looking back was probably like a child's piece of wood. It wasn't really a proper bat, if you know what I mean. But and the first ball I received from him, I managed to defend it, just thudded into the bat and rang right through my hands, wrists, arms, everything. And I thought, oh, a bit of a different game this. You know when you've been playing something, you think, we're all right. And then you go to that next level and you go, oh, I see, it's like this. Fuck. And anyway, long story short, off the back of that, their coach said to me, would you like to come and play with us? And I thought, well, that sounded like quite a good thing to go and do. So I played with the club in Teignmouth was called Winterbourne, and they were housed, they weren't part of the school, but they were housed within a school in Teignmouth. Same school that Muse went to, the rock and roll governors Muse went to that school a couple of years later, just for a bit of popular culture flavour. And so I played at Winterbourne for a few years in the sort of the various age group sides there.
What was your forte?
Half decent team. I was a batter and I became a wicketkeeper as well. But we had some really we played under this captain called Justin Day, and his younger brother Jamie was in the side as well. Jamie went on to be a goalkeeper for Exeter City at some point as well. But at the time, Jamie was a very rapid bowler, and Justin was just an excellent, probably the best captain I ever played under at any stage of my cricket career. And it was when I was about, between the age of 14 and 16 or 17 or something like that. He was old, wise beyond his years. I remember him. I remember my old man scrounging a cigarette off him when this kid was like 14 at this tournament we were at one time. He was wise beyond his years. Really good cricket brain. And we had these players. We had a kid who could swing it around corners. We had this lad, Jamie, who was really quick. Justin was a really good all-rounder. I think he bowled a bit of off-spin, but was a very, very competent batter as well. Quite a decent keeper, not me, who you just had all these characters who had trained. I remember actually going back for our first game of a new season, and I got out cheaply, and he said, Justin, my captain's asking me about, what went wrong or what happened. And I said, I've had no nets, no practice. And he looked around at everyone and goes, how's he had no nets? Why are we letting this happen, kind of thing? Which again, just sort of underlined the kind of the expectation, the level we were playing at that point. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed my time there. And then that led into when I went off to university, played for the college team a couple of times. I didn't get in the first team regularly in my first year, but as I went through, I had 4 years at university. By the time I got to the fourth year, I was captain, and we managed to win the Cambridge College League title that year with the help of some good young talent. So, a potted history of my childhood and teenage playing.
So it sounds to me like, unlike a lot of other guerrillas, you were actually quite competitive in your capacity.
At moment, from sort of humble beginnings in Newton Abbot, when I went over to this team in Teignmouth, it definitely felt like that. Yeah, and we played in a pretty serious league, and I managed to pull a couple of my. Hang on a minute, so I've got some admin pane flashing up on my screen. Computers do too, isn't it? Do this. I don't want to do it. I managed to get a couple of my mates, Neil and Duncan, from school to join the team I played at as well. And I remember one time we were in a right lot of trouble against this one South Africa who we were playing. But I managed to chip in with 20. My mate Neil chipped in with 20, and Duncan got a 40 or something. And I remember our
You're frozen on me. Is that me or you?
Yeah, so we Coombs Head boys had all got a few runs, and our coach, who was a chap called Tim Rice, believe it or not, not that one, but a different one, just said, "Oh, Coombs Head saved Winterbourne that day." That was quite a famous day. Anyway, so I suppose to your point, I was it was relatively competitive. The cricket I played both there and at university. But always enormous fun. Usually played in a good spirit, not always, but usually. I do remember one kid actually in South Devon, an opposition team that we played, when two of our batsmen were at the crease, and as they turned to consider a second or a third run, he stood on the wicket and shouted "yes" like that, deliberately to put people off. And I thought that was a piece of shithousery that stayed with me for a long time. Didn't like him.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. It's interesting talking to other guerrillas that I think the social aspect of cricket has been as important to many as the actual playing side, and that may relate to the lack of talent on some of our parts. Because the Bear is probably the most competitive I've spoken to.
Yeah,
he liked to win. He really did like to win.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I mean, well, I've always been a bit like that. I've always, when I've played anything really, from cricket to football to squash to Monopoly to anything. I remember an incident when I had a snooker table as a kid, and here comes my dad again into a story. I was 11 years old, and I was playing, had a mate of mine round, and we were playing a few games, and then my dad joined in. We had a little round robin tournament. My dad beat me in the final of it, and I cried. And he basically has said to me on more than one occasion when I was growing up, well, there's no point letting you win, So I've taken that into my own fatherhood, and regularly make my kids cry when I beat them at things.
How old are they?
My boys are Freddie's about to be 12 in a couple of weeks' time, and Bertie is 9.
I anticipate revenge will be sweet for them over the
Absolutely,
next few years.
yeah. Oh, Bertie had me right over at Monopoly the other day. I had him on toast, and he turned it round. So yeah, I was gutted.
As long as you don't still cry when you lose. It's interesting talking about your father. He was obviously a big influence from the sporting point of view. What was the first Test match you ever went to actually watch?
Oh God,
Did
that's a
Dad
good
with
question.
you?
I remember him going up with his mate to an Old Trafford test in about 1986. I can't remember who would have been playing then. Possibly it was one where Gatting got like a big 100, like a 160 or something, and he went up with his mate. His mate was a big Man City fan. Dad became an Ipswich fan, although had been a Manchester United fan as a child, and so they went up together in my dad's mate's Flash. Sierra Cosworth, which apparently would reach speeds of 140 miles an hour if you so wished. Anyway, it was the 80s. What can you do? Yeah. And I said, "Can I come then?" And he just went, "No." So, I'd have been 14 years old. Thanks very much. I can't remember my first Test match, Messrs. That's really bad, isn't it? I do remember going when I became a sort of independent being and going so early in my university career. So we're talking early 90s.
Yeah.
I remember. It wouldn't have been the first Test match I've been to, I don't think, but I'm trying to think what year it would have been as well. Possibly a bit later, but we play in West Indies at Edgbaston, and England had picked Richard Illingworth, who's now an umpire, as you know, and he, I don't know, it's fair to say he was at international level at least a spinner of, limited ability.
Yes,
but the pitch had been prepared specifically for him, and it had been prepared in the following way: they had basically shaved bare at either end of this pitch, ostensibly to help, drier, more grip, whatever it would be. But of course, what it did is just provided on an even length. It provided a kind of a ridge between the grassless bit and the slightly grassed bit. The likes of Curtly Ambrose and Courtney Walsh could just hit, and we knew we were in trouble because the first ball of the Test match, bowled by, I think it was Ambrose, just flew over Junior Murray's head. And went for 4 byes, 1 bounce, and we thought we're in trouble here. And sure enough, England were bowled out for 147. I remember the headlines the next day: England snookered on 147, and West Indies were like 130 for 1 at the end of the day. So yeah, that was a memorable early Test match that I went to. Would have been, God, what year did West Indies tour in the early 90s? Oh, would have been 91, wouldn't it? It would have been 91 when. Or maybe it was the one after that. The 91 Test match, actually, sorry, the 91 series where we played West Indies, the famous Graham Gooch heading the innings, 150 odd. Some people consider to be the best Test match innings of all time. He scored 154, I think, out of England's 220 something against that very famous attack. But at that point, I'd just returned from France, where I'd been an au pair for 3 months. It was my gap year between A levels and going up to university, and because I was going to go and study French, I decided it would be a good idea to go and learn it like a native. And I remember I just got back, and I think Derek Pringle picked up a lot of wickets in that match to win us the game. So there you go. That's me conflating 2 different matches at least, and if not 2 different series.
You got to see a win. I mean, I suspect the experience of being thumped by the West Indies probably wasn't a bad piece of training in terms of future disasters.
Certainly. I mean, through the 80s, I'd suffered like every other England cricket fan. The series of 84 and 86, the home series, and then I suppose I paid more attention to the home series in those days, purely because coverage of away series was less, less end to end.
Well, I was going to ask you. I mean, I've spoken to a number of Guerillas now, and one of the things that seems to be pretty common is the fact that you might have gone out playing as a kid, but when you came in, the TV was on with the cricket, and it was just part of the house. It seems to have a huge impact on the way it becomes accepted into the family.
Yeah, and one thinks back to those long summer holidays of youth where you'd have kids sort of TV programming in the morning, which would typically culminate in an episode of Why Don't You? I don't know if you remember that from your days. It was probably after you left.
My time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it did run for a good long time. Why Don't You? Many listeners will remember it, I'm sure, if you lived in the UK back then. And you'd have a London gang, a Bristol gang, a Glasgow gang, a Cardiff gang, a Belfast gang, and in the Belfast gang, it always used to bang on about, now we're going to watch a film, which always used to make me laugh. Anyway, and when the cricket was on, after Why Don't You, would come the Test match, and you'd have Peter West introducing it. You'd have Richie Benaud. You'd have Jim Laker. I mean, like many fans, I remember Richie Benaud incredibly fondly, and he sort of came to be the voice of cricket. But I think if I think back to my really early days as a viewer, probably Jim Laker's voice is the one that I associate most with becoming a cricket fan, and it being synonymous with those days. I mean, back to 81, when was it Headingley or Old Trafford, when Botham, he went to his 100 with a 6, and Laker mistakenly said, "What a way to go to a 6." Meaning, of course, what a way to go to a century with a 6. But I still remember that. I remember those very words.
Because my generation was much less TV and much more radio. So John Arlott is the voice for me that means cricket.
Yeah.
Still.
No, absolutely. And I have a huge fondness for John Arlott, but I can't say that I consumed him in the same way that I did, say, Jim Laker.
Yeah.
But latterly I've sought him out, and what a great man. I've told this story many times on air, but years ago, and this would have been just before Arlott died. It must have been one of the last things he did before he died. It was a VHS of some of his favourite memories from down the years. So you had Viv Richards' 291 at the Oval in 1976. To use Arlott's phrase, "all lordly command," and he introduced this video from his own wine cellar. And it started, and he was not in the best of health.
Yeah.
But he's standing there in his shirt, probably a cravat, bloated face. But his introduction was so beautiful and magical. He said, "Cricket is a very emotional game." And it just started like that. I thought, oh God, yeah, this is brilliant. And then the all lordly command comment, I thought, oh God, what a man. But no, I totally get that. And I'm sure if I'd been born 10 or 15 years or earlier before then, he certainly would have been the voice as well. But yeah, Jim Laker for me would have been the first one.
Once you've been to university, did you keep playing once you were off at work, or?
No, it's sort of, I've probably played a couple of games, sort of invitation games and fun games shortly afterwards. I remember a mate of mine who I knew at university, he had been to school in Bromsgrove, and both his parents had been teachers, and I think I was invited to go and play at the school there. Bit of a fun game, but literally one or two, and then it sort of dried up, and I never sort of went and sought it. I never sought out a club in London when I moved to London. And then, lo and behold, 5-10 years gone by, and I was like, I played cricket for a while. So no is the short answer.
Yeah.
But your life moves to a different stage. You start doing other things.
No doubt you're ferrying your boys to the cricket clubs on Saturday each week, or
we've joined, or they have. We have joined through them, Mitcham Cricket Club, which is just down the road from where we live, or a few miles down the road, and they play on what is probably the oldest continually used pitch in the world. When we joined, it was 334 years old, which I said in a rather nerdy way. Oh, the Bradman, because that was the Bradman score, wasn't it? That would have been 2 or 3 years ago. So it's 336 years it's been in the same place on Mitcham Green, and it's kind of almost like an island, because you have to cross the road to get to the pavilion. And anyway, so it's a lovely club, Mitcham Cricket Club, big shout out, and incredibly friendly and well run, and the people who run it are absolute heroes. So very, very happy with that, and I hope the boys continue to enjoy it, really.
Right. So how did you come into connection with Guerilla Cricket, or was it the sofa when you first came involved?
No, I had been a sofa listener, and I just thought this was a wonderful, glorious indie kind of venture that had a certain reverence towards Test Match Special, which all of us would have listened to growing up, but that did it in that rather sort of punkish, do-it-yourself. We can do this now. We've got the technology. We've got these characters. You don't have to have been an ex-player to be involved. You don't have to be a professional journalist to be involved. We've all got stuff to say, and we can do it. So I started listening to it, and just quite quickly, really getting into it and thinking this is a fantastic thing. Started tweeting in, and I think Mark Zipp put it really well once when he said, when you get your tweet read out on Guerilla, you get this little endorphin rush.
Yes,
you do. You get this.
That is so true.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God, because it feels, although it's clearly not a professional venture, it is still being broadcast, ostensibly to the world. And oh my God, I've just been read out on this program, and so that was all tremendous. And some of the jingles were genius as well. I really remember the first time I heard the Carpenters Wide jingle.
Yeah.
So it's slightly different these days. I don't know if they had to change it, but it was just like it felt like it was going to go straight into Close to You. So wide, and it's just had me roaring with laughter. I thought, God, this is so clever and funny and entertaining, and it's given me a different way of listening to the cricket, and I can have the pictures on at the same time and all that sort of stuff that people do now. And so I had become a bit of a regular listener, and then I didn't listen for a while, and then I was writing an article for The Independent in 2016. I used to write the odd sort of sport feature article for them in a highly non-professional fashion, and by that I mean I wasn't getting paid, as opposed to the quality of the output, which of course was exemplary. And I did a piece for them which was about commentary. I love sports commentary just in general. My mate Deck and I are always chatting about commentary and the tremendous words that have accompanied certain events in sporting history, not just cricket. And so I did this piece, and what I wanted to do was kind of look back on some classic pieces of commentary, and then talk about some of the kind of the new kids on the block who are around now or at that point. And one of the new kids was, well, at that point, and in researching the article, I had assumed that Test Match Sofa had ceased to be. At this point I was unaware that it had been bought by the Cricketer magazine and that hadn't ended well. And I was certainly unaware that it had been reborn as this thing called Guerilla. But in my extensive research, some light Googling, I discovered that it was still going. And I was like, oh my goodness, brilliant. And so when the article was published, I was actually doing a bit of work in Barcelona at the time, just to make my life sound a bit more glamorous. And so I name checked Guerilla when I tweeted the article link out. And then the next thing I know, I had this DM from someone at Guerilla saying, oh, thanks for the mention in the article, very kind of you. You must come in and do some commentary one day. And I thought, best thing ever. Yeah, I'll do that. and so that resulted in my going in for the first ever time, June of 2016. So Christ, 5.5 years ago.
Shit.
And the first game I did was it was the day after the referendum. The referendum.
At the jet lag, were you?
No, it was in Sydenham. It was in Sydenham. All right. So all the fallout from that was happening. And I went on air with Hendo and the Bear, and they opened the show with "If You Leave Me Now." So it was all of that, and at the time, Michael Vaughan, who I know is slightly persona non grata on our show, but he a couple of years previously had made his debut on Test Match Special, and he had opened with which I still think is quite a good line, because he replaced Jeffrey Boycott in the chair. And he said, I've always wanted to say this, Boycott out and in walks Vaughan. So as a pastiche of that, my first line on Guerilla was, what was it? Something like UK out and in walks Howarth, or something like that. So the game was it was a one-dayer between England and Sri Lanka. Had a very nice time on air with Bear and Hendo. A good couple to be on with for your first little stint. And then later that day, after a few beers and everything, and Bear said, oh, do you want to go and do some ball by ball? I said, yeah, come on, then bring it on. And literally my first ball was an England wicket. England taking a wicket. I think it was Plunkett bowled Angelo Matthews or something. So the first ball I commentated on in Guerilla was a wicket, and there you go. So yeah, I mean, it's flown by 5.5 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and I remember meeting up with Hendo at the end of that year. By the end of 2016, I'd become a sort of regular participant, fortunately, and I just remember saying to Hendo, "It's like the best thing I've done this year. It's been absolutely brilliant, and yeah, loved it ever since." So yeah, that's how I got involved.
I got to say, just talking to people like yourself who've been involved, life-changing isn't too big a description for the way it's affected some people. And, basically cricket means guerrilla cricket when it's on. And it's such a totally different way of consuming it, even if they're not actually involved in the commentary. I had one person today said, "Am I a guerrilla?" And I said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, you are." I said, "I think it's a matter of self-identification. If you think you're a guerrilla." He said, "Oh, my heart beats that little bit faster." So
there you go. There's that endorphin rush again.
Yeah. So it is a community that's quite extraordinary in that regard.
I think it totally is, and a very interesting, weird, strange, diverse, type of community as well. And I've often said this to Hendo and anyone else who listen. And this will sound, on the surface, a little bit like I'm having a go or a pop, but it's not. It's meant affectionately. I've often considered Guerilla to be a home for the lost. It's like
absolutely. Yeah, I relate to that 100%. Yes,
and I totally include myself in that, of course. But it's people who are seeking some sort of meaning in their lives, and who have a huge range of interests as well. We know, don't we, that some people like, I don't know, Japanese manga, and some people like grindcore, mentioning no names, and some people like I don't know, art house German films, and some people like the most kind of esoteric alternative music or whatever it is. But the fact is, what we all have in common in that strange Venn diagram is this sort of love of cricket right at the center of it, and watching it, talking about it, joking about it, arguing about it is all part of it.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw that clip I put up of the interview with Kat, where she was talking about running out of people to go to the cricket with her because they'd all got other lives, and suddenly she discovered Twitter. And she watched the cricket by herself, but she was watching it with the people on Twitter. And Guerilla's just another step on from that, basically.
Yeah, I did see that, and I felt I was like, oh, bless you, Kat, for running out of people to go to the cricket with. That sounds like the saddest thing in the world. I mean, it's great that you resolved it through Twitter and other means as well. But that I mean, the thought of that happening is kind of a horror, really. But then there are other times when you can go to the cricket on your own.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the other thing, isn't it? It is something that can be consumed singularly, and I know that a number of our community are avowed kind of introverts, and
we were the ones who used to sit at the back and score every fucking over when we were 13. You remember that?
Yeah, and the world needs introverts, and so if people want to go and watch the cricket on their own, like I'm a big fan of going to the cinema on my own as well. Why would you want to go with anyone? You're trying to watch this thing on a big screen. Why do you want someone else there with you, spoiling it and asking questions and eating popcorn noisily? And cricket's very similar to that. So anyway, yes, the Guerilla community. God bless us all.
Yeah. So that brings me to your favourite jingles.
Oh, Hell's Teeth, yes. You did say you were going to ask me this. Now, there are a few that I like. One that springs immediately to mind is, and one we don't hear very often these days, I guess because he doesn't feature in many of the games that we cover, is Luke Wright.
I knew you were going to say that. He's come up half a dozen times.
Has he? Oh, so I'm not even sort of individual and interesting. Yeah. So just to remind people, then it's based on the Tears for Fears song that was done by Gary Jules, and I think it was a Christmas #1 about 20 years ago. Beautiful song as well. Mad World, but there's a bit a line that goes, look right through me, look right through me, but of course that's turned into Luke right through me, which is tremendous. I really like Stuart Broad has got a number of jingles, many of which are quite amusing about how pretty he is or whatever else, but the one that always makes me chuckle the most is the what would make Broad walk.
Me too.
Love that. And then when I joined Guerilla back in 2016, I thought, this is great. Now I'm part of this lovely community that we were talking about. Like, everyone's allowed to do anything. So I said, I'm going to try my hand at a couple of jingles here. We played Pakistan later that summer, and I did 2 or 3 jingles. I did for Yasir Shah. I did, and I don't reckon anyone has ever done a jingle before to a Baccarat soundtrack, but this was so instead of Yes Sir I Can Boogie, it was Yasir I Bowl Googlies. I can supply the sound file, messes, if you don't have it. What else?
It's almost certainly in the archive.
Yeah, no, it is in there. I did one based on a Smith song for Mohammed Hafiz. So instead of please, please, please let me get what I want, it was Hafiz, 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 let him run up and bowl. And then I did one to the tune of Those Were the Days, My Friend, by Mary Hopkin. Was it? Who did that song back in the day?
It was.
For Misbah al-Haq.
That's right. I remember.
Which had a clever wraparound rhyme to it, messes. But anyway, so I submitted all of these, and I realised that the Bear wasn't ever playing any of them, and he confided in me a bit later on that they didn't quite conform to the production standards that he'd set himself. Because I
have to laugh. The concept of the man who bloody constantly playing that fucking Dame Pete jingle having production standards. But never mind. But anyway, there is a lot of competition. I discovered in talking to both Mog and Perko that each of them has done well in excess of 1,000 jingles each.
Amazing. Yeah, they are absolute stars. I know we've had Crikey in Munich and James Sherwood and people like that who are very, very good.
Dave Barrett.
You know, Dave, fantastic as well. Actually, there are a few of his that I like. I like the Temba Bavuma one for no other reason. It's just, you know, I mean, talking about production values, he's a professional musician, so he knows what he's doing. There was the other one actually that I remember talking of Dave Barrett is Hendo and I and someone else were on commentary, and from the adjacent, this is when we were still in Sydenham, and from the adjacent room, from the kitchen, we just kept hearing these noises like and we thought, bloody hell, the bear's being murdered. But we thought, true professionals, we stay on air, keep bringing everyone the cricket. And what we realised is that he was shouting on cue from Dave to make this jingle, and it was the "We Want Your Money" jingle, the one that's based on the Pink Floyd thing. So the bit that goes "money," that was the bit, and we didn't realise what was going on until we heard the jingle. No, so I like the Temba Bavuma one, but there are lots. So there's Mog's. I know Mog's Stokes one from a few years back with all the swearing in it gets a lot. And that I remember sitting up during that winter's Bangladesh series, and particularly sitting there with Gary Naylor, and whenever the Stokes jingle came on, he and I would just look at each other and cry with laughter. And actually, once or twice, the unexpurgated, is that a word? Unexpurgated version was played either by design or by mistake.
It's not so funny, is it?
It's very, very sweet. No, much funnier when it's got bleeps, particularly when you understand what it's bleeping out. Because when you hear the non-bleeped version, sometimes it's just him going, said I made him sick, and he's bleeped out made him sick for some reason. So the bleep version, much, much funnier. Yeah,
absolutely. So that brings me to my last question to you, and I suspect I might know an answer to this. Your favourite cricketer?
Oh God, do I have to pick one?
Well, you can nominate a few, but you got to put one on the top of the heap.
Okay. Well, I did a little list. There's a new social media website called social media site called Upmost, which has been launched by a friend of mine here in Tooting, and it's basically a place where you can go and make lists about anything and anything. And so I did one of 10 of my favourite cricketers. Now I'll run through a few of those for you. Derek Randall was in there. Who I don't have any specific memories of Randall, just that whenever he was on the screen, he was absolutely captivating. I mean, mad as a box of frogs. No, mad as a box of frogs, and a wonderful fielder. So he's always been high up there. I fell in love with David Gower from a very early age, and that love has never waned. So he'd be right up there. There are some cricketers from around the world. I've always loved watching Sehwag bat.
Yep.
Always loved watching Shahid Afridi do whatever he was doing in a game. Utterly, magnetically captivating. Shane Warne. We may not like him, but by Christ, he was something that we'd never seen before or since, and hardly like to ever see again. And by sheer force of will, kept Australia in that 2005 series, and was just one of the most tremendous cricketers. Viv back in the day, of course. Beefy back in the day. Who else did I put on my list? I'm trying to think. I put Tammy Beaumont on there as well.
Excellent.
I wanted to include a woman cricketer, and Tammy is my favourite from that England team, which is a very likeable team. I know it's changed a lot over the last few years, and I just think back to the 2017, the Women's World Cup, where England beat India in the final.
It must have been, yes. Must.
Yeah. And again, I've told this story before. I remember watching that game in a massive Irish boozer down in Morden, and having to. Eventually, I was downgraded to the tiniest TV. There were loads of these big screens up, and then even then, someone came up and said, "Could we have the GAA game on there?" And I said, "I think that one's on the big screen round the corner." I was jealously guarding my tiny little screen. So Tammy, firstly, a wonderful batter. And secondly, just plays the game the right way. I think like any kids watching who want to know how much fun cricket is, just watch Tammy Beaumont play. Wholehearted, massive smile on the face. So again, just really, really good for the game. But that's a handful of cricketers out of thousands that I could have named.
Who did you have at the top of your list?
I tried not to put it in. I mean, it does put it in an order for you. I think I listed. I think Randall was the first one on the list, but it doesn't mean he's top of the list. I don't know. Gower.
I am surprised, actually, to hear one name not on your list.
Oh, Joss.
Yeah. I mean, you and Joss have always had this thing going between you.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love the bones of the man. Still do. Nothing's changed. But I have come to realise that I don't think he's. Well, look, I want the best wicketkeeper in the England side, and that is not either Joss or Johnny Bairstow. So that's just the thing that I feel, and it's a bit of an old-fashioned view, but there you go. That's my view.
Sadly, it's not Billings either.
No, indeed.
Well,
still love you, Joss. Still love you, Joss. Don't go changing. Don't go crying. Those beautiful eyes of yours.
Oh yes, Annie would be devastated if you'd betrayed him. Well, I just want to say thank you, Grubby, not just for your time tonight, but for all you've brought in terms of the fun, the joy, the laughter, and the expertise on the Guerilla cricket. As you say, it is a crazy family, but we're not actually stuck with Stockholm syndrome. We do come by choice, and it's those such as you that keep us there. So thank you very much indeed.
Listen, it's an absolute joy to do it. Always is. From the first moment I did, that first England Sri Lanka game, through to whenever I get the chance to do it now, we do it because we love it. It's a joy, and it really enriches my life, and I think everyone else who's involved. So, no, thanks for putting these interviews together as well. It's another lovely layer to our entertaining but dysfunctional family.
Thanks, Grubby. See you later.